Ready to go? Ready? Okay. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Colonel Craig Bailey, a native of Valdosta, Georgia, graduate of Francis Marion University in Florence, and I think he must have decided at Francis Marion he liked school and schooling and class, because I won't give you all of the schools that he has attended and graduated from, but after the Marine Basic School in Quantico, where he became an instructor, a graduate of the Amphibious Warfare School, got his Master's of Business Administration in Strategic Management, a graduate of the Air War College Seminar Program at Hickam Air Force Base, a graduate of the Reserve Officers Joint Military Operations course at the Naval War College, graduate of the Senior Planners course, and a graduate that just goes on and on and on. So this may be about the most educated speaker that we've ever had. So we've got high expectations for you, Craig. Craig, between all of his schooling, he did have multiple deployments to the Far East, multiple deployments to the Middle East. He deployed to Liberia as the senior U.S. Defense Advisor to the Liberian Ministry of Defense. He was in Iraq as the Multinational Forces West Point Training Team Officer in charge, and has had other assignments to include his current assignment at the US Africa Command, and he serves as Strategy and Posture Division Chief, position he's held since August of 2012. He's a reserve officer and is periodically called up, he'll explain this to you, to go to US AFRICOM headquarters and serve in this position, which he shares with another colonel. His civilian job, when not on active duty, is as managing broker of Joy Real Estate, which is one of the largest independent residential real estate brokerage firms in South Carolina. So that's a lot going on in his head, with half of it thinking about selling houses and real estate and all this, and the other half thinking about strategy in Africa and how he manages all that inside of one skull without it just his head blowing up. I don't know, but maybe he'll explain that to us. But please welcome Colonel Bailey to us.
Okay, forgive me for just a minute. We got a whole technical thing I got to do here. I got to grab microphones, and we're filming today, so we've got to get it all together. I asked for a longer leash, and so we've been playing with that. So Lord knows how this is going to work out. And sometimes you get a longer leash, you end up hanging by it. So forgive me if I end up tripping or grabbing something here that I shouldn't. So. Can everyone hear me okay? Is okay? Do you need me to grab the other mic and do that as well? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Bob. I really do appreciate it. I don't know if we were just talking to Bob a few moments ago, and if you'll look here at the table, you'll notice that he hasn't even started eating yet, and we're finished. And that's because he is running around putting this thing together and working hard on doing this. I've attended, I think I attended the first one, which was General Robeson. Yeah, Master Robeson was the first one. So I've been here a good number of times, and Bob has done a fantastic job, and I'm certain there's other support staff that have done some help with you as well. But the show is always good. I think you all will agree. The food is always great. The wait staff is always great as well. So certainly, thank you, Bob, for the hard work on that. I've enjoyed them, the ones I've come. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you. I usually come as a guest to Archie Black. And is Archie come? Has he made it in yet? Oh, there we go. Okay, Archie's back there. Archie had a closing. He was trying to get wrapped up. Thank you for coming, Archie. Archie's usually one that invites me, and I've been to most of these, so I do appreciate the opportunity. And I guess that will lead into sort of why I'm here and why I thought maybe you all would enjoy this is, over the time that I've been here, we've really had a smattering of different folks. Everything from General Robeson, who was talking very strategic in many ways about the Pacific Theater, all the way down to some very tactical, sort of practical of folks that came as well to talk about what happened on the ground in perhaps in Iraq and other places like that. So it's a great smattering sort of, or a broad brush of different types of topics there. So what I have noticed, though, is that you show up, okay? And that meaning, what by meaning that is that you're interested in this. This is something you find interesting. You want to know, and you like this. So I knew I had this background. I'm currently the Strategy and Posture Officer for the US Africa Command. I'm a reserve guy. So I have current knowledge. I'm writing strategy, literally, for the U.S. military in Africa. So I knew this was an audience that probably would appreciate that. And so I hope you find this presentation something that you can use. Now, what I'm really looking for from this presentation is really to do a couple things. One, I would just really like to answer your questions. Africa is a little bit of a backwater, a little bit of a sleepy backwater. You may not know a lot about it, so maybe I can tell you a little bit about what's going on down there, okay? What we're planning to do down there. At the same time, maybe I can dispel a few myths. I can answer a few questions that you may have. By the way, as I'm going through this, if you've got a question, just throw your hand in the air. I'll be glad to go through this as we, to answer questions as we go through. I'm going to kind of break this up into two pieces. I'm going to start the first piece of it. I'm going to talk about strategy and the U.S. military strategy for Africa. And I'm going to talk about what we're doing down there. I'm going to talk about why Africa is important. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the practicalities of being on the ground. I've got two different slideshows for you. One is our no kidding, real live strategy brief we give to people when they come to the Africa Command. It's in class. You don't get all the detail, but it is exactly the same one. And then the second one are just some personal, some from my personal time when I was down in Liberia, some real no kidding, some photos and some actions and some things I've learned from being on the ground, spending a lot of time on the continent. So let me start with, let me fire this up. I had to reset it a moment ago. It looked like it was advancing on its own. Okay, and then the other technical piece, let me see if this is going to be if this clicker is going to be live or not here. It requires me to break out glasses to figure out what I'm doing here. Okay. All right, as mentioned, this is going to be the strategic overview from the United States Africa Command. I'm going to talk a little bit first about Africa and why Africa is important. I want you all also to get a feel for some of the challenges that we face from Africa. This right here, this first slide, begins to perhaps peel back the onion a bit so you can understand some of the challenges here. Look at the text there. In Africa, we're dealing with over 3,000 different ethnicities with 2,000 different languages. Okay, that's the ground level. Okay, then we're going to put a level on top of that. You notice that the map of Africa, by the way, the colors there represent different tribes, different ethnicities that we have to deal with. Now, you notice overlaid on top of that, you'll see the lines of the actual countries. So we have to, in fact, deal with the folks, I say deal with, but we have to address issues that are present just from the simple political lines that are there. We have to address those. Then, to layer on top of that, we've got all the partners. We've got the Germans, and we've got we've got the Brits, and we've got the Italians, and we've got you name it, layers on layers on layers of other folks that are also playing at the same time. Not to mention the Chinese, who are working hard in Africa as well. Okay, so the Chinese. I haven't even begun to talk to you about what the bad guys are doing yet. That's where we start. Okay, that's where the strategy, and as we are trying to operate in Africa, that's where we start, which is already quite a jumbled mess. Okay. Because of that and the nature of that, one of the things that we did when we stood up the US Africa Command, which was in 2008, we designed the Africa Command a little differently than the other commands. The Africa Command is kind of a hybrid, perhaps. And what we have done is we have integrated many other diplomatic personnel and State Department personnel into the staff. We've embedded them. If you look at our structure, we have a 4-star general, General Rodriguez, very accomplished, very good guy. He's the man for the job. I really appreciate serving under General Rodriguez, 4-star general, Army general. Under him are two different commanders, essentially. We got a Marine 3-star, General Hummer, and his counterpart is an ambassador, is a no-kidding ambassador, who then can help us break through some of these country-level issues that we encounter. Very unique. And they hold sort of equal rank there at the command. And each of the staff units have State Department personnel and other other U.S. government personnel that are part of our staffs. I'll give you an example. In where I'm working there, I have a Department of Energy employee. That's one of my advisors. And she, by the way, funny thing, she's from Boiling Springs, South Carolina, of all things. Little homegirl there. But she's from Boiling Springs, but she knows oil, because oil is very, very important to me as a strategy guy. Very important. So she's my oil go-to. She helps me understand what's important and what's not important about oil. Okay, very helpful. So I wanted to give you an understanding of that. The other thing that you should notice from this diagram, and many of you have probably read about it or heard about it, you see all these little ethnicities, and you notice that the political boundaries are drawn around all over the place as well. Well, you notice, and this is not any different than if you go to Afghanistan or if you go to Iraq, same thing, that these political boundaries are not following the lines of the tribes. These political boundaries were drawn by the Europeans who came to Africa and stuck their flag in the ground, with disregard for where ethnicities were and how you broke lines. Okay, so borders are very transparent to the local guys. They could care less if there's a border between Liberia and Guinea, and I've got some photos of that later, for instance. So that kind of helps you begin to understand the problem set, I suppose. Okay. Other reason why we're talking about Africa and why Africa is important. Well, let's talk a little bit about the African economy there. Primarily, if you notice, the precious metals, diamonds. Y'all have heard the blood diamonds, etc., and oil are our primary things that from a resource perspective that we're concerned with. Oil. Let me talk for just a half a second about oil. Oil is certainly up in the northern part of the African continent there. By the way, and I should have pointed this out on the other slide. Understand that the US Africa Command does not include Egypt. We have 53. There's 54 countries in Africa. We only have 53. Egypt is assigned to the Central Command because it's more aligned with what they're doing, by the way, so you'll know. But you also see the oil down in the Gulf of Guinea, all right? Now understand, and I'll give you an example of sort of the things we work with and we think about on a day-to-day basis, is that oil that you see right there. There's a lot of oil, a lot of to be had, but it is not high-grade oil. And a lot of people don't realize this. This is things I'm learning from my Department of Energy folks. That's not high-grade oil. It takes a lot of refining. The best oil you'll find anywhere is here in the U.S., by the way. It's called light sweet crude. Requires less refining. That's why it's so important for oil manufacturers to have their hand on that. So the dollar per barrel goes down, perhaps, and which again can be passed off to the consumer in the terms of savings. Just a little aside there so you can understand. But oil is very important, and certainly the other resources there, such as the precious metals, are also very important. Getting them out of Africa is the problem. Okay, getting them out of Africa is the problem. Note the second bullet there. Per capita GDP is $1,200. Man, that ain't much. That's what people live on. Now, obviously, the prices are a little lower, but not much. I mean, you'd be surprised. Getting your hand on a gallon of milk is pretty expensive there. Okay, if that's what you need. $1,200 a year there is not very much. You know, it's the you know, essentially if you make $2,000 or if you make perhaps double that, $2,400 or $5,000, you're in the 1% there. You're a 1%er there. So perhaps. Other thing to be aware of: look at the unemployment in youth. That's the last line there. North Africa, which is kind of the area in the sand, and then the sub-Saharan Africa, which is the area in the green. Okay, in general, high unemployment. High unemployment. What happens when you get young men that aren't employed? Yeah, they think of things to do, don't they? And guess what? If somebody holds out $1, guess what they're going to do? Whatever they tell them to do when they hand out the $1. Okay, so that's another thing we're running into, which is why it's important when I'm looking at strategy that we've got a concerted effort with the State Department to help these countries also do the right things to provide jobs for their folks. Sir?
Is that just males or males and females?
Yeah, this one here is males and females here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, the diaspora. Here's the thing that you got to understand about that is that many of the locations there in Africa are tied to the U.S. and are tied to Europe through the diaspora. There are many immigrants, especially here in the U.S., that have come from Africa. Tons of them that come from Africa. My time in Liberia, I'll give you an example. The Minister of Defense, Brownie Samakai, that I worked with on a day-to-day basis, essentially, during the war in Liberia, he lived in Columbia, South Carolina. That's where he lived. And we talked about Columbia, talked about going to the Gamecock games, and etc. He's back. He is now, the Minister of Defense, essentially the Secretary of Defense of a small African nation. So there's close ties to the diaspora as well, which means it's something we have to deal with, and also to the European countries we have to, because there are populations out there that want to know what you're doing. Okay, we include this one here because I want to, this is, to me, in today's world, might be the most important slide we look at. To me, may be the most important slide. When you're looking at the threat, and the threat to this country, and the possibility of extremists, and in this case it tends to be your Islamist extremists, those are the ones that tend to be the ones that are willing to do the worst. And they've proven they're willing to do the worst. So we go in places like Iraq, we go in places like Afghanistan, and what we want to do as the U.S. is we want to fight that battle on their territory. We want to push them out. So they're not at our shore, okay? Well, here's the issue, looking at the flight thing. If I'm going to fly from Kabul, Afghanistan, I can't get here. Guess what I got to do? I got to make a couple stops along the way. Guess what? If I'm a Muslim extremist, I get on an airplane in Lagos and I fly 9.5 hours and I'm landing in New York City. 8.5 hours, I'm flying over the U.S. So what's our warning? What's our warning in Africa before a potentially bad attack? We got 8 hours to do something about it. Okay. It's a one-hopper to us from Africa. So the extremists and the people that we'll talk about the enemy here in just a minute, so to speak, we'll talk about them, are an 8-hour trip away. So that's why Africa's, in my opinion, from a military perspective, that's why it's important. Got to keep that at arm's length. We got to keep that. They can keep that at home. Let's don't let them bring it this way. Okay. Find my clicker here. Okay. the geostrategic environment here, let me just point out a few things. If you'll notice, this is kind of a layout of where major terrorist activities happen, major disaster events, etc. And you will see the coloring of the different countries are on the failed state index is on the far left-hand side. It's by color, with the darker oranges and red as being the countries that are closer to being failed states versus the ones that are in the cooler colors, the greens that are less or most stable, perhaps. You'll notice here, where are the ones that are red? Right there in Africa, right? I mean, this right there, and smack in the middle of the map there, along with a lot of the different the issues that you see, the little bomb burst there that's showing that there are quite a few issues. Again, some of that is self-fulfilling in a way. If you've got a state that's about to fail, they tend to have a lot of problems along with it. So that's part of what you're experiencing there. But I like this map too, because it also shows some other countries that you may not think of as being kind of unstable, but they are quite, by the failed states index, are more unstable than you think they are, especially if you look to the east and things like that. I thought that was an interesting thing for most people to look at. But so we got that issue there, that layer. All right, more of why it matters. Look at the distances here we're talking about. We could fit the United States, China, Argentina, and Western Europe all in the footprint of Africa. Man, Africa is big. It really is. And I'm not kidding you. It is hard to get from point A to point B. I'm going to preempt a question, and as a way of explaining why this is important here. Sometimes we get a question, and I kind of expect somebody might ask about Benghazi. Okay, and why didn't the military? Where was the military, and why couldn't we get to Benghazi, and what were we doing, et cetera, et cetera? Well, look at this map. The distances we have to cover to get to Benghazi are almost insurmountable. Even if we had a ready force in the southern part of Europe, getting to the point of attack would have taken 5 hours by airplane. And then, guys, once we get there, we got to then travel. We got to get from the point of the aircraft hitting the ground and fight our way to the fight. So add another 4 hours to that. It's about an impossibility. We got a lot of pressure from folks that are higher on the political chain to come up with a strategy that kind of covers all the possible problems that we have at all the embassies. Well, here's the problem with that. Well, back up. And without putting a lot of forces on the continent, without a large footprint. Okay, so that tells us Europe. We got to do something in Europe or off a ship. Well, let me tell you. Let me explain this to you. If we have forces up in Europe and we have a problem somewhere down in the middle of the continent, someone explained this the other day, and I thought it was a wonderful explanation. It's like having your house catch on fire in New York and the fire department being in Honolulu. That's what we're talking about there. That's the kind of distances. See, we don't understand those kind of distances. So if you have an immediate issue and your fire department is in Honolulu, it's going to take them a while to get there, to load up and get there. So that's the other important consideration we have to think about when we're writing strategy for Africa. Okay, Asian Pacific rebalance. The administration talked about rebalancing, refocusing on U.S. Pacific Command, and as part of that, and literally, what you can see there's a big old green continent that's kind of stuck in the way there. Now, certainly we can go from the west coast of the U.S. and move towards the Pacific Theater, but anything that's on the east coast and in Europe, you've got to go through Africa or around Africa to get there. The two diagrams in the bottom, they're a little small, so you can't see the detail, but you can see the general flow. And what they're showing here is kind of the current shipping routes. And what they did is they tracked the GPS pings from those ships, and then they mapped them. So you can see where most of the ships in the world go through. And look at this big red going right through here, right up into the Gulf here, the Red Sea here, and then around Cape of Good Hope. Most of them are going around the Straits of Malacca and up through up toward China and Japan. Likewise, you can see over on this one here, Africa itself being highlighted, and so you can see where the sea routes are around Africa as well. So it's important that we have control of the sea lanes and the littorals, because we're shifting. If we need to go toward Asia, we've got to go through Africa somehow or another. Okay. A big slide with a lot of things for perhaps a short explanation. All right, so I've kind of given you the sort of the laydown. Now let's talk a little bit about the strategy itself and what we're trying to do and some of the enemy. We create this thing here. This is what my division does. We create this theater strategy and posture. Posture means where do we put the forces? Okay, we create this. To do this, we create this. We also actually create this on behalf of the commander to the mission and the commander's end state. We do this. We get that direction from a couple of different national level documents. The national level documents, for the most part, come from the Department of Defense, which are derived and or we get extra guidance from the administration. We have been operating on guidance from the prior administration up until about, let's see now, and I didn't pull the number. I should have perhaps, so I don't mislead you. Up to about the last 2 years, we've received guidance from the present administration on how to operate with Africa. You got to remember, us military guys, what we do is we operate on the last guidance we were given. When they say forward march, we march forward until somebody tells us to go left face. So that's what we were doing. We were operating on the prior administration's guidance for Africa. Things kind of went awry in Africa. We got some new guidance from Africa. So that's part of what has changed our strategy, and the strategy you're going to see here was based on some of the new presidential directives, etc. Okay, here's based on this is the guidance, and this is what we're trying to get to. Now let's kind of I'll pick a few of these, and then I'll jump right through. At the top there, you can see one of our end states we're trying to do is to get the affiliates and adherents and Al-Qaeda in Africa neutralized. Okay, neutralizing those guys. Assuring freedom of movement through Africa. So if we need to pivot on our way to China, perhaps, or somewhere out there in the Pacific, we can in fact use airfields and ports there. Likewise, we can use the airfields and ports to get the problem areas. Let's see, African states and regional organizations are willing and able to address their threats. So we want the Africans to address that problem on our behalf. We don't want to put the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force on the ground to address that. We want the Africans to do that, okay? And then African militaries to operate under civilian control. Boy, I tell you, it's a problem in some of these smaller countries like that. You know, you give a little bit of power to that general, and heck, if he is going to listen to what the president is telling him. So we try to train them and teach them how to be subservient to the rule of law. Okay, not above the rule of law, but subservient to the rule of law. That's our end states. That's where we're trying to get. Our mission there is at the bottom. And the keys there is that it's interagency, international partners. We're going to do this mission in concert with those, and as well as our African partners as well. Okay, I doubled one up there. Pardon me. Okay, so here's our sort of our threat map here. Here's what we're looking at. So what we do is we take those end states. Okay, now again, this is unclassified, so I'm not going to give you any of the details behind these, but these are unclassified. These are the end states I just talked to you about. These are what I just told you we're trying to get to in Africa. These are the things that my staff came up with. They dreamed these things up, and they're certainly approved. And to get to these, we figure we need a couple of different lines of action or lines of activity, okay, along here. And I'm not necessarily going to go through all those. But we're doing this to take care of these issues right there. Now let's go, I'm kind of go around the clock here, starting with the instability and illicit trafficking. Instability and illicit trafficking there, that's the Gulf of Guinea. That's Nigeria, that's oil. That's what we're focusing on in that place. Piracy is rampant. The rule of law on the high seas is a problem. Fisheries. I mean, we run the whole scope of things there. Going on up, we have AQIM, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. The Maghreb is that border between sub-Saharan Africa and Saharan Africa. It's called the Maghreb. Al-Qaeda operates heavy there with Boko Haram. Now, they're not near the coast. They're kind of in the center of the continent there. Tough living, tough place for them to be. We can keep them bottled up there. That's what we want to do. Okay. Go around to the right-hand side. Al-Qaeda in East Africa. Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab in Al-Qaeda in East Africa. That's Somalia, places like that. Ethiopia. Again, piracy is a big problem there. We want to fight the battle there, not let them transport it here. LRA instability. That's the People's Democratic Republic of Congo. That's Joseph Kony. That's LRA stands for Lord's Resistance Army. Okay, and they're causing some trouble there in Central Africa, and our strategy is to again combat that as well and keep it contained and neutralize it, frankly.
Colonel, can I ask?
Yeah, please go right ahead.
We're pretty regularly getting stories about what is it, Boko Haram?
Yeah, Boko Haram. Mm-hmm.
Am I pronouncing it right? They're wiping out, according to the news we read, entire villages, slaughtering Christians, beheading kids, adults, like they're running rampant. And I wasn't aware we had any interest, much less any direct influence over what was going on there. It seems like they're running wild. Right? This is what we're reading.
This is exactly what I wanted to do. There's some questions. Can everyone hear kind of what the question was? The question was about Boko Haram. It seemed you see news reports where they're running rampant, they're running crazy, they're killing people, they're kidnapping. You all right remember the girls, the hundreds of young women that were kidnapped by the Boko Haram. Okay, they're a very real problem. They are certainly a real problem. And his question was, is that true? What is happening there? What are we doing about that? He didn't realize that was perhaps one of our objectives there. Certainly. Okay, Boko Haram. There's multiple problems with Boko Haram that we are encountering. Let me talk first about Boko Haram and what they're doing in Nigeria, perhaps with the kidnapped children, the kidnapped young lady, the girls, and things like that. I will say this: you got to understand that Nigeria is not recognized by the U.S. diplomatic side as being a country that we can interact with, or we can have any kind of military crossing with. We cannot do that with Nigeria, okay? Because they are on the list of places that are not doing enough to stop terrorist activity. So we will help them when they do their little checklist of items they've got to do. Now, whether they're simply reluctant to do it because they think they're the big kids on the block, or they are unable to do it, remains to be seen. Many times they don't want to let people know that they really can't accomplish it. They would rather put their hand in the face of the United States and say, I'm standing up to the United States, instead of admitting, I can't do it. Help me out. So many times, and for leaders, many times it's more politically expedient for them to put a hand in the face of the United States. 200 young ladies are out there in the jungle. Do you think they might care about that? Probably not. Yeah. So, again, that's just my thought. That's my thought on that one. Right there. Yes.
Colonel, question. You mentioned China earlier.
Yeah.
When the United States puts these moral stipulations to deal with countries, we all find that China is not putting those and therefore gaining an advantage.
Great question. Great question. Can I tell you the number of times I sat there with the Minister of Defense in Liberia, and he was asking for things for the U.S. government to do things. And I would say, well, you know, we're not here to do that, and you know, we want to, you all take the lead on it, et cetera, and that sort of thing. And his response to me would be, that's okay, Colonel Bailey, the Chinese will do it for me. And old Colonel Liu, who I know, and I wish I'd have brought a picture of Colonel Liu, my counterpart, my Chinese counterpart, old Colonel Liu, and his wife, both of them would be there, will be sitting in the out office waiting for me to walk out. And when I'd walk out, he'd walk in. And he'd drop his, you know, his bucket of money on the table and say, you know, cause they don't play by the same rules as we do. That's a very good question. Chinese don't play by the, guarantee you, there's something, and I don't know, but in my mind, if I'm the Chinese, I'm in there offering Nigeria a whole lot. You know, strategically, I'm offering them a whole lot of help without stipulation, so I can get my hands on those natural resources. Okay, sir.
How do we expect the local governments there to be able to function when the allegiances, as you mentioned in one of the earlier slides, go all the way back to the tribal allegiances, similar to what we dealt with in Afghanistan?
Yep.
Even if you have somebody that is good and wants to do the right thing,
Yep.
do they even have the ability to get it done?
Many times, no. And I'll show you a few slides in a few minutes here about my time in Liberia. One of the things we did when we helped them rebuild their armed forces, we said you've got to do it across tribal lines. So we brought people from all ethnicities into the organization. But I tell you, the folks that are in one tribe, when they get in charge, it is going to be a hard day for those that are not of the same tribe. It's going to be a hard road home. So, good questions, though. These are great. And I hope this is kind of clearing up some questions. Yes, sir?
Having traveled to South Africa, I've heard that people say that they kind of consider themselves the United States of Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're teetering on the edge of going one way or slipping over into the morass of the
Yeah.
rest of Africa is. Where do you think South Africa is today on that edge?
Yeah. Notice if you look at this in our strategy here, what's decidedly missing? Nothing in Southern Africa. Nothing in Southern Africa. Yeah, what we're expecting them to be able to hold their own. That's the big key. Can they hold their own against the problems that are there? Now, again, our diplomatic relationships with South Africa are not the best to start off with. As good as they are with some other countries, certainly. But they are able to, they're sort of the regional big daddy down there. They can hold that, and we feel confident and comfortable that they can hold that area down there. So we don't expect them to roll one way, any worse, perhaps. So.
Colonel, could I just
Yeah.
ask one follow-up?
Yeah, please.
On that map? I'm still,
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Still mulling about Boko Haram.
Yeah.
And the earlier slide you showed that it's an 8-hour flight.
Yeah.
And that's the most virulent form that Al-Qaeda, a branch of Al-Qaeda right now. You gave us the kind of official line that we're waiting for Nigeria to come around to our point of view in terms of how to do things.
Yep.
We must have CIA or some kind of undercover intelligence operations to keep an eye on these guys, do we not? Are you able to talk about that?
Here's what I would say. I am certain somebody above my pay grade is doing something. Frankly, I don't want to know, and I don't care to know. That's right. The other thing about, for instance, and I'll give you an example of what we can and we do to help, like with the kidnapped young ladies. Yeah. What we do is we will put in forces, small forces, around the borders of Nigeria with countries that are friendly will allow us access. And then we'll do things like we'll fly RPVs, remotely piloted vehicles, and pick up intelligence and things like that. But we do not, we don't put boots on the ground inside there. But we'll do things like that because Boko Haram is going to drop back across the border. Now, if they drop back across the border and where we're operating, well, let's just have a good time. Let's go dance, But for the most part, those are. Let me tell you guys. Again, remember I was telling you, multiple levels here, multiple layers of issues here. Lots of seams. Lots of places people can, the bad guy can squeeze through. Lots of them. Sir?
You said the guidance was changed a couple years ago.
Yep.
How do we measure whether it's working, and how do we measure that we have achieved success?
Yeah, and that's good. And again, what we're looking at are these end states. And if you look at these end states, they are long-term end states. And we do have, what happens is then we take these end states, and then for a particular area perhaps, the East Africa perhaps, then we take these and we break those down into intermediate objectives. And we begin to say, we know, for instance, in the first one there, African governments counter al-Qaeda intent and capability. Let's just say that one. We may have an intermediate checklist that says that they have an army that stands up and that has the capability to attack a platoon-sized unit and with supporting mortar fire. So that's a checklist. We know we're moving in the right direction, for instance. So what you're seeing here is high-level, multi-year strategy. Right, we got here. So.
Well, is it working?
Yes. Yes, it is. It is working actually it's working quite well. Really, truly is. But it's working quite well thanks to your tax dollars, by the way, okay? You got to understand this. All this stuff, every one of you guys in here in the room, you're fighting this battle along with us. You're supporting this because when we got these armies that are needing training and we're doing things, the U.S. government's paying for that, okay? But I'd rather put my dollars out there and pay for this kind of training and pay to get to this end state than to put a battalion of Marines in the jungle somewhere and have to have a knife fight every night. So, sir.
What is the current estimation of the armed forces that's ongoing now impact on this particular thing?
Yeah, this Africa for us has always been I guess sometimes in military parlance, it might be called a economy of force theater. And for us, it is what we do on a day-to-day basis is really not impacted that much. Really is not. If we were to have a major conflagration, which is unlikely on the continent, we might have some difficulty because then we don't have forces to draw from. We are benefiting some from the, I don't know if you want to call it the peace dividend. You remember the old time we had the peace dividend, but as they draw down in Afghanistan, that does in fact free up some more forces for us to use and do things with. Okay. But because we're light, it doesn't really require a lot.
Based on our experience in Iraq and Syria,
Yeah.
where we at least established some balance point,
Mm-hmm.
and then as we withdraw troops in both cases, it's like the wall caved in.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to develop a new foreign policy where we just have to understand that multiple trillions are going to be spent to maintain forces because we're dealing with such different cultural,
Right.
organizational differences in
Yep.
these countries?
And that is the challenge. That is the challenge, is getting this message to the people that have the money, which of course is our Congress. That's the challenge there. And that's why I'll give you a little bit of the political spin on it. That's why we say Africa's important, because they're dollars that follow importance. If I can shake you up a little bit in here, maybe you'll call your congressman and give me some more dollars. But certainly, there's got to be a long-term concerted effort on here, certainly. And it's not up to me. All I can do is make the case. All I can do is make the case. So. Me personally, yeah, I think we need to put some more money towards that, certainly. Ma'am.
Have you heard of a group that was called Executive Solutions that used to be stationed in South Africa?
Yes, matter of fact, I sure do.
Would it not have been good to keep them together?
I don't know enough about what happened there. I do know some guys that work for those folks. I know some from the Brits that I knew that went to work for the Executive Solutions. Sure did.
It seems like they were very good at what they did.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
can help us out now rather than disbanding them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, certainly. Sure.
Do you work effectively with the French? I know that they were very active in the former colonies like Mali and
Yeah.
Niger and so forth. They played very active roles.
Yeah, and the French military they're good. They're a good bunch of chaps, and they are some tough guys, especially the guys that are operating in the jungles with us. Man, there's some bad dudes in there, and I would stake my life on their abilities. Certainly, they're good guys. But the French have been very good and very helpful about approaching the issues that were their former colonies. Takes the pressure off us. If they weren't dealing with the problems in Mali, we would have to be doing that. So that it's taken. Now, you got to understand though, the French can't do it without us. They need our airlift. They need some of our support as well. So it's not a one-man show for them. So, good question. Let me transition. I bet we could talk about this all day long. I hope you all are finding this interesting, and maybe something new here that you didn't know about Africa. Let me talk about some personal things that happened on the ground. I got quite a few of these, but this is a fairly fast run through here. But let me talk about a few things here. It requires me to turn this and point it the right way. Good thing this is not a weapon, huh? I would have shot myself with it right there. Okay. Okay, let me start off with talking a little bit about the new Armed Forces of Liberia. When I was there in Liberia, this was at the beginning of 2008. Literally, when I left Stuttgart, Germany, Africa was under the European Command, and while I was there, it flipped over and became the Africa Command. So when I came back to Stuttgart, there was the Africa Command. And I don't know if people know that. That's where the Africa Command is headquartered. When I go over there, it's Kelly Barracks there in Stuttgart. If some of you may be familiar with Kelly Barracks in Stuttgart. And as Bob was mentioning, help you understand, there's an active duty guy that's my counterpart, Air Force active duty guy. And when he takes leave or is going to go, he has to deploy forward, we'll get on the phone or via email and he'll say, hey Craig, can you come in and sit in for a couple weeks? And then I'll go a few days early. I'll get spun up, and then I'll sit in for him on the active duty side. And then when he comes back, we'll do another switch off on the way back. That's how I'm kind of involved in this. Next trip is going to be in the first part of April. We're heading back down there. Last time I was there was in October, about 3 months ago. So I don't have all the latest information, but strategy doesn't change. Strategy is pretty much the same. Okay. So, all right. Let me talk about the new Armed Forces of Liberia. We were just standing up the Armed Forces of Liberia. They have been, we were finishing the disarmament and the repatriation of all the fighters, the breaking down of the old, much like we did in Iraq, just decimated, tore apart the old army and rebuilt it. Okay, so this is showing kind of some of the things that we ran into when we were doing that. First of all, this is a view from standing on the porch of the Liberian Ministry of Defense, essentially the Pentagon. UN forces, you'll see this throughout here, UN forces there. The largest UN contingent in the world is there in Liberia. You see bullet holes everywhere. I mean, everywhere you go, it's a problem. Looking the other way, you can see that it's all barbed wire and bullet holes. I flip it around, that's the Ministry of Defense. That's the equivalent to the Pentagon there, okay? That's what you're working with. Lucky if the air conditioning stayed working throughout the day. Generator sitting right here because that's the only source of electricity, not coming off a national grid. It's off that generator. And when that thing got hot and started smoking, we had a problem. Okay? One of these things are not like the other. I don't know if you can pick it out. That is a staff meeting with the Ministry of Defense. Okay, and there's the old Colonel Bailey sitting there, the old Marine Colonel. To my left is Sergei Abdurrahman, Major General Sergei Abdurrahman. He is the Chief of Staff of Liberian Armed Forces, but he's a Nigerian general seconded to the Liberian Armed Forces there. On this side of the room, you can see this. The other one that doesn't look like the others. That's Lieutenant Colonel Bob Knight from the UK Queen's Regiment. He was my UK counterpart, my British counterpart as well. Not pictured is the Brownie Samakai, who would be sitting at the head of the table, and his two deputy ministers. One of the deputy ministers, Dionysus, I can't recall his last name. Dionysus was his first name. Former Army Sergeant, U.S. Army Sergeant, fought in the First Gulf War. Was a cannon guy. did the big left hook, okay? That's who we're dealing with here. Played pro soccer for Kansas City. And now is a deputy minister of defense for a small African nation. On the other side, the other deputy minister of administration, was in the U.S. Navy. He was a recruiter assigned to Times Square. So, and he spent an entire career, 14 or 15 years in the U.S. Navy. Got the calling and went back to be, he's enlisted, both these gentlemen were enlisted gentlemen. And now they're deputy ministers of defense of small African nations. So that's who we're dealing with here. So, great folks though, great folks. But it introduces a lot of layers of issues there, certainly. Okay. What we had to do when we got there was that we had to go throughout Liberia, and we talked about getting folks from different tribes. We went throughout Liberia, and we recruited new folks for the armed forces. What you see here is sort of a testing. What we would do is we would have these physical fitness and mental tests and some written tests of potential candidates for the armed forces, and then we would vet them to make sure they were also not part of an extremist organization. Okay. Because the Muslim extremists are also operating in Liberia, plus a heavy criminal element. So what you see here is just that this happens to be right there in Monrovia. My hooch is on the other side. One of those little square hooches is where I lived when I was there in Monrovia. But this is a group here that's lined up for an assessment. You can see them doing their sit-ups. You notice the folks that are monitoring don't even have uniforms. We didn't have this is before uniforms. These folks are contractors. Your government dollars, your U.S. dollars are paying these guys' salaries right here. By the way, I should have gone back. Sergei Abdurrahman, you're paying his salary. Your tax dollars paid his salary. Okay, you paid his salary. Show you, and this is one of my favorite pictures here. They're getting ready to do the run. Look at the footwear. You know, you got tennis shoes, you got some wrestling shoes, you got ballet shoes, got a guy in socks, you know, getting ready to make their little 2-mile run for time there. So a little different animal. Okay, I love this next little series of about 3 or 4 pictures here. That was the vetting process. This group had been vetted. These folks, these young fellows right here, came from out in the hinterlands, and they were brought in. This is, guys and gals, day 1, first hour of welcome to the Army. This is the induction into the Army right here. They've shown up, they've just got off the bus, essentially. And you all have been, I knew you guys would like this, because every one of you have gotten off the bus before. Yeah, and this is day 1. This is in processing day 1 right here. Same thing, just the same exact thing that you all did, okay? To include the requisite haircut. Line them up and shave. But they took a straight razor and they would shave these young fellas' heads with. And of course, these guys have never been to a city like Monrovia before. I mean, it's just, to them, it's just it's a shock to their system. Swearing in day. Once we get them all shaved up and run them through a medical test, we put them in these PT uniforms, ship them out to Camp Ware, and where we're going to swear them in. Now, I like this picture because this is the very first boot camp, very first class of the new Armed Forces of Liberia. But the thing that's important to me to tell you about is you look at these guys here. These are all American boys, all former drill sergeants from the Army, drill instructors, etc. These are contract guys. These are guys that are on contract with PAE and people like that, DynCorp contractors, okay, that are drill instructors for these young folks. Starting in the Army. Got no sergeants, got no NCOs, got no officers. So we had to be the officers, essentially, and the NCOs. And there they are raising their right hand, taking the oath. So show you this picture just so you can understand how the living conditions are there in the Armed Forces of Liberia. This is in the kitchen of one of the chow halls, and you can see they just cook in a big old pot with coal. No electricity. That's how they feed those young fellas. There's the galley there. Okay, that's the cook staff. Followed by a beautiful picture of a horse I'll tell you about in a second, but there's the chow hall behind you, and then there's the horse. That's Charles Taylor's horse. Some of you may recognize the name right off the bat, Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor is the blood diamond guy. He's a guy that was tried at The Hague and was sentenced about a year ago, almost a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now. This is 2015. Was sentenced to life in prison in England because of the atrocities. That's his horse. He used to live out there. This was out at the barracks at Kesley Barracks. And the horse is still out there. And the soldiers feed him, and he walks around. So. Here's the officer corps for the new armed forces. Every one of these young soldiers here are not from Liberia. They're from neighboring countries that again are seconded to the Liberian Armed Forces. In the back is another British officer that took Bob Knight's place, as Andy Hart of the Irish Regiment there. Good chap there. Okay, another photo here. The French came in the French Navy came in. A ship came. They wanted to play a soccer match, so we put some uniforms on a couple of the Armed Forces of Liberia guys and told them to go play the soccer match. But the thing I want you to notice from this is the ground's dirt there. There's only one place really that has grass, and that's the one stadium, sort of the national stadium. Everything else is just like this, dirt. And we were lucky to get some chalk on the ground there. But I put this picture to frame this picture, really. What you see here is a couple of the soldiers, okay, over here, and the one soldier on the left-hand side. That soldier on the left-hand side had just returned from Camp Lejeune, literally a couple of days before, where he went through the squad leaders course. He is one of the first NCOs in the Liberian Army. So essentially what you had to do is go to the privates and figure out who can read, who can write, who may be able to lead, and you send them to the U.S. to NCO school, slap a couple of stripes on them, send them back to, and guess what? He's only 2 weeks more senior than the rest of them. Okay? But he's an able leader. You see him in front leading. What he's about to do is lead them into a traditional African Liberian tribal dance. This is kind of during halftime. Okay? And I tell you, these young guys begin to cut a fool like you've never seen in your life. It was so entertaining to watch them. But it just goes to show you, privates are privates are privates no matter where you are. They will act a fool given a half a minute. Given an audience, they'll act a fool. Good kids, though. Okay, life is hard. Life is hard in sub-Saharan Africa. It is very hard. Maslow's pyramid, you recognize this quickly. You got to understand, most people there are operating right here. That's where they're operating, okay? I say that because you got these people who may go to Africa and they give books and things like that to Africa. I had a good example here. It's a fellow showed up one time from a missionary group that passed out canes to the blind. The white-tipped canes to the blind, and gave them a little class and taught them how to use it. What do you think those guys did with those canes? And probably better than that, perhaps. They sold them. They sold their canes. Why do they sell their canes? Because, my goodness, they just simply need that. Don't give me a cane. Cane's up here. Today, I need to feed my family. I'll forget even the moral implications of any of this up above. I got to feed my family today. I'll sell that cane for. So we encounter that time and time again. Schoolhouse at the church, First Presbyterian Church, Monrovia. I go to First Pres here in Greenville. I love it. I went to church there on Sundays. I literally wanted to get in with the Africans and understand what they were doing, so I went to church with them. First Presbyterian Church. This is their classroom, one of their classrooms. Nothing like what we're used to. The classroom that you saw was kind of in the white area to the left. And I took this picture of this little alleyway with this little, you can see there's a little small opening right here to give you this photo, which is the picture of that opening. Now, I don't know if you can see it with the light and everything, but what you can see in the background there, if you look closely, on the floor there's some slippers, some flip-flops, and in the back there's some clothes hanging. A family lived there. They lived in the crawl space of the church. That's where they lived. That's the kind of problems we're dealing with when we're talking about Africa. Here's their drinking water. They've got about that much left. Not to mention when you're going to wash, where you're going to go to the toilet. You know, that's the kind of problems you're dealing with in Africa. That's the kind of problems that people who are their leaders, who just simply, one, don't have the resources and many times don't have the understanding and the ability to make that go away or make that a better way of life. Typical market scene, it's just a jumbled mess, certainly. The guy who's making the most money in these, if you look at right here, there's a lot of people that are selling these things, different items down the way. These are all wheelbarrows that people cart their goods to the market and they cart them back home. The guy making the money is the wheelbarrow guy. That sells these wheelbarrows. Every car you look at that. Every car is yellow cars. Because everybody wants to be a taxi, so they paint their car yellow, saying that I will take. This is Uber. This is the Uber argument right here. You know, I'll paint my car yellow. You flag me down, you know, for a few bucks. I'll take you to Monrovia. You know, type of thing. I love this picture of this little baby. You can see the little baby. This is how the African ladies would carry their babies. They would strap them across their back, little feet sticking out. The baby's just happy as a clam there, asleep. Police officer. You notice the police officer in the background? He's doing a lot of good, isn't he? And that's another reason I have this slide here. You got to understand that places like Liberia, police are fairly ineffective. They really are. If there is a crime and you need the police, guess what the police has got to do? He's got to flag down one of these yellow cars, take money out of his pocket, pay that driver, and say, take me to the scene of crime. Now, how many of those guys you think are going to do that? Okay. There's no transportation for those guys. Sometimes they may forcibly commandeer a motorbike or jump on the back of one. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen one of those guys riding down the road on a motorbike behind someone. This is where I stayed here. This is inside the compound. I wanted just to frame that picture. I literally stood on top of some stairs there, took a picture over the edge, so you can see what it looks like in a post-war type of African country. It's a mess outside of the wire, so to speak. Go to the next picture here and just give you a few more. People, life is hard. Life is hard. Okay. Some more pictures there. Life is hard. No electricity, no water. There's the public toilet facility. Okay. You notice that just dumps right into that little river right down there. Look at the trash on there. This is actually, and I'm standing on the wall. I'm standing in a guard tower, looking over. This is right outside where we are. That same river, there goes the same river. Note this bridge, and I'll come back to it in a minute. Same river down through here. In the back, right behind our wall here, bad guys begin to build. These were former AFL. These were some former combatants that begin to build some shanty houses both ways. I'm literally standing up there taking pictures on the guard tower. Here we go. One morning I awoke to all this clutter and fuss and fire and smoke going on. So I hustle on over to the tower, climb back up. This is very early in the morning. Take a photo, and that's what I saw. Overnight, the Liberian government came by and just raked it clean. That's the other picture the other way. Because they were certainly, they were causing trouble and being there. So that's how they took care of that problem. They rolled it up. Now, there's a few places that we probably could use to do the same thing too. But beyond that, what I want to point out is this. You see these two little girls? What they're doing is they're recovering these concrete blocks. Let me tell you guys, nothing goes unused in a place like Liberia. Nothing. That place was picked clean. I should have had another picture a little while later. Picked clean, because they'll use those blocks and they'll build their own place. Remember the bridge I showed you? Here's another view of that bridge. God gracious, it's got a hole in it. When I arrived, the UN had just paved it. The UN had contractors come in and pave it. Holes in it. Let me tell you how that hole got there. I get a call one night that there's a problem down on the guard tower. down outside the fence. So I'm climb up to the top of the guard tower and late in the night, maybe first thing in the morning, early in the morning. And I got the guard there. He's a little shaken up. He's got his weapon on his shoulders, and he's aiming down range. Now this is a contract. This is a contract security guy. By the way, and I got a million stories to get me going here. Contract security guy that was contracted to the U.S. government, run by a former Marine captain who started he realized they needed security, so he went out and recruited a bunch of Liberians, taught them how to handle weapons, taught them how to be good. They're good. They were really very good. But just a Marine captain. It was great to see him. He always had a shotgun and a bandolier of of rounds around him. So they call me and they tell me, Colonel Bailey, we got something. They're tearing up the bridge, Colonel Bailey. And the kid's got him in his sights. He says, "I got him, Colonel Bailey. I can get him." And I'm like, "Stop! Just stop. Put the weapon down. Don't shoot this poor guy here." This poor guy. Did anybody have any idea what he was after? Just out of curiosity. So, who said that? Somebody said rebar. Rebar. They're trying to get that rebar. That rebar, because that's metal. See, they can sell that. They can use that for other things. They're trying to get that rebar. Now, that poor fellow, these guys, and every night they go out there and chip away at this. So the answer to that is tell the local police. And that's what I told. I said, we'll report it. We'll let the Liberians take care of that. We'll let them take care of that. We're not going to shoot anybody over. Some poor sap trying to get rice for his family is out there chipping away at that. So if he can get it, bless his heart, he can have it. More pictures of Monrovia. Sniper's nest up on the top there. This bridge was the only bridge really in and out of Monrovia. Snipers would tie down units forever along this bridge. You can see that also became a very strong target there. I show you this picture. Look at the bullet holes in this pole here. Every pole you go by is like that. It's just chewed up. It's just absolutely chewed up with the rounds. Happened to play. Liberia played Gambia in a World Cup soccer match that I happened to be able to go to there. Got caught in a riot. I'm trying to get into the game, and there's a riot going on. And my security detail, Africans, said, "No, Colonel Bailey, we're not." I said, "Come on, guys, let's go. No, Colonel Bailey, we're not going." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Colonel Bailey, this is Africa. You don't understand." So, I love it. Ever wonder where your clothes go that you donate to Africa? Look at that fellow's shirt says. TL Hanna JV Golf. This guy that happened to be working on the post there, and I grabbed him and snatched him. I said, "You got to be kidding me!" Took a picture of the back, sent it to the coach there, Ken Littlejohn. There's your other place your clothes go right there. So. Adequate medical care. This is John F. Kennedy Hospital. That's a working hospital. That right there is the laundry. Okay, don't get injured. Don't get injured in the sub-Saharan Africa. There is no help. Okay. African Partnership Station. There's the Fort McHenry that came off the coast. We put some of the African soldiers on there, led by Marines, to teach them and train them in soldiering skills. Wonderful opportunity for them. There's the president of Liberia, and there's her official hornblower. Love this guy. Everywhere she goes, before she speaks, he blows the horn. There's the Bobo, which is one of our preposition ships. We were looking at a new way of getting supplies ashore and that sort of thing on these lighters. There's the old colonel standing at the end of the lighter, way out in the ocean there. Port of Monrovia. Notice the fouled harbor with the ships there that are sunk. Only certain ships can get in and out. This was the HSV Swift that got in there. Okay. Into the bush. Let me show you a few of these. I am running. You get me talking, I'll talk all day long. Let me show you a few of these, and we'll keep moving. UN outpost out here in the back, out in the bush. You notice there are Russian helicopters. That's the helicopter we would transport ourselves around in. There's our welcoming party, and there's the Greenville Airport. A lot of people don't realize there is a Greenville, Liberia. There is. Liberia, don't forget, is named, like Monrovia is named for President Monroe. There's Buchanan, named for Buchanan. Liberia was named as the place of liberty for slaves. And there's the old colonel there standing in front of the Greenville Airport. There's our security. Let me roll through a few more that might be important. High-speed road. Looking both ways. That's way out in the bush. There's a high-speed road there. Avenue of approach. Reason that's such a high avenue of approach is because if you're off that road, that's what you're in. So if you can control the roads in Liberia or anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, you can kind of control the movement of forces because they're not going to beat their way through these forests here. Ship with rice. This is a contract ship from the UN, Katarina, offloading rice. Another fouled harbor. Only one ship at a time can get in there and offload rice. There's the good colonel out at the border with Guinea. There's the crossing. Remember earlier I was telling you about the crossing with Guinea? There's the border crossing with Guinea. You know, and the old fellow there on the right-hand side, you know, he's a real Elmer Fudd kind of. He's in charge of the post there. Real Elmer Fudd kind of guy. And there's the whole gang. Talk to some of the locals, and I say, do you go across, how many times a day you go across the border and all that? They don't go across the border. They just walk down the trail in the jungle and cross the border. Or they'll cross on the river. They don't care. Their grandmother, who is of the same tribe, lives on the other side of the river. They're not going to go through that border right there. Completely porous. We load up some vehicles to do some recon out on the backside of Liberia. Nice sleepy Pakistani guard there. You can see it's UN folks. Coming up to a watering station here. Typical family out washing their clothes, getting a bath. Little kids, literally, that's the way they're living. Happy as can be, living like that. A lot of deforestation. That deforestation there was used to create charcoal that the people cook with. That's what they used that for. The gentleman to the right there, who shall remain nameless, you notice he has a really nice camera. Let's just call him Jim. But he's let's just say he's a diplomat from the US Embassy. You can imagine what his background is. Final thoughts here. Everyone was one mistake away from death or destitution. It truly is the case there in sub-Saharan Africa. You make a mistake, you're done. You really truly are. A ship that was captured, drug ship, $5 million worth of cocaine on it. Listen, guys, the budget for the Ministry of Defense was less than $5 million. Rainy season, a lot of water. You can't move when it's rainy season. People talk about getting to places to rescue embassies. In rainy season, you're not getting there easily. Rubber. Rubber is very important for Liberia. Largest rubber plantation in the world. Firestone. Also the largest army in West Africa. New barracks being built. You see the flag sticking up there? The red flag, right? Chinese flag. In there contracted to build barracks for the Liberians. It's sort of my final thing here. Children don't whine. And I put that on there, and I'll tell you this and wrap it up here, is that I didn't realize that children don't whine in Liberia until I came back to the U.S. base in Stuttgart. And I'm over there at Panzer. I go to the exchange, and I hear the American child going, "Mom, I want more of this." And it struck me that the whole time I'm in Liberia, as bad as the conditions were, as awful as living, I consider living was, the children never whined. They always kept a smile on their face. It was striking to me. That's Jeffy right there. Good, happy little fellow there. So, With that, I'll leave Jeffy's smiling little face up there, and I will turn it back over so we can get wrapped up and get out of here. So thank you.
Craig, thank you so much.
Yes.
Appreciate your presentation. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. If anybody's got any afterwards questions, I'm
Yes,
sure you
I'll be
can
glad
take
to
them
stick around.
after. See you next month.